What's up, spectators? Welcome back. Let's play Chaos Child, the Spike Chunsoft port to PC, because I think the original publisher is 5PB, and this came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so it's been a little while. But since it's on PC, I'm playing it for the first time, and this is related to the Science Adventure series, which includes Steins Gate, as you might be able to tell from the semicolon in the center, Robotics Notes, and Chaos Head. All of those I've seen before, but I have no exposure to Chaos Child, so it should be pretty interesting. Typically, it involves some weird mind-bendy stuff that I'm pretty excited about. And I've never got to play the Steins Gate visual novel, even though I still intend to do so. So I don't know what to expect from this. I don't know how the gameplay is going to be. I just know it's going to be pretty exciting, and without further ado, let's get into the game. November 6th, 2009, 10:28 p.m. It came without warning. It was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake with an epicenter directly under the city. This disaster reduced one of Tokyo's busiest downtown areas to nothing in a single night. The high-rise buildings that had birthed so many trends and fads collapsed, as if giving up on their role in society. Black fire spread through the city. As individuals fell into the grip of the crowd psychology, their terror was magnified. Combined, all of these things took many lives. The final death toll was 3,851. The final number of injured, 30,927. This event would later be known as the Shibuya earthquake. I swear to God, if they said incident, I'd be like, not another game, not another incident translation. Even in all that destruction, people still suffered the most in their hearts. Some who had lost their families came together to share new resolve, while others who had been forced to watch their friends die were driven by guilt to take their own lives. As a baby was miraculously reunited with its parents after 72 hours, a child in an evacuation shelter asked her dad, "When's mommy coming home?" He had no answer. Some of the wounded made it to the hospitals by looking at real-time updates on the web. Others saw people on the internet talking about the disaster as if it were a movie, and were driven mad. A homeless man was saved from malnutrition by an organized volunteer group, but at the same time, a middle school boy punched a self-centered volunteer who'd come to Shibuya to find himself in the face. It was the first time in that boy's life he'd ever been violent. The psychological toll was incredible, and many of the survivors would later manifest symptoms similar to those associated with PTSD. The young were hit the hardest, and before long, the cause of those symptoms were given a name: Chaos Child Syndrome. Rebuilding happened at a feverish pitch never seen before. It felt inappropriate to say, "hang in there," but people felt that somebody had to do something. The new slogan was Shibuya, a city reborn, and no amount of money or manpower was spared in aiding the endeavor. The whole town was in the grip of a fever. In private, a leader of the redevelopment effort said, "This may sound unkind, but this frenzy feels like a town burying its grief by holding a festival." Building codes were rigorously evaluated with an eye toward earthquake engineering. Perhaps in an effort to emphasize the city's safety, security cameras were put up all over town. Shibuya would become a place where everyone could live in peace. But at the same time, a rumor began to spread about the earthquake. Something about this earthquake doesn't make sense. There were no aftershocks, and the damage had spread in a strange way. Harajuku and Ibisu, areas only a kilometer away from Shibuya, suffered few casualties and even fewer collapsed buildings. This damage pattern had never been observed in any prior earthquake, and so more than a few pundits claimed that Shibuya earthquake must have been artificial. More than anything, some of the survivors all said the same things. "I saw a white light. I heard a sound like a ringing in my ears." Too many people experienced this for anyone to laugh it off, but no cause of those phenomena were ever found. It was just more evidence to those who believed that something about the earthquake had been wrong. Then, 6 years after the strange earthquake in 2015, something else was about to attract attention in the reborn city of Shibuya. September 7th, 2015.
はい。ではいつも通り3分くらい募集をかけるんで、適当によろです。
So there are voices, but in Japanese, so should I read it or should I not? If I read it, it'll take twice as long because he'll have to say it, then I'll say it. I'll decide that later. Okay, so it's mixed. Alright, in that case, if it's Japanese, I'm not gonna read it, and then when it's my turn to narrate, I'll narrate. The second he spoke, the comment box started to fill. Yuma Utani watched it for a few seconds, and then saw the request. "When does Haru tell us she's dating somebody?" he smiled to himself. Just what he wanted. Most of the requests were about hot actors or cute idols. His audience was so stupid that it was easy to tell exactly what they were going to ask. The problem was always whether the name that came up was someone he knew. That was a question of luck and of how popular they were. But Haru, her full name was Haruko something or other, she was fine. Just a few days ago, he'd forced himself to go to an event he'd rather have skipped, and seen it for himself.
Yosh.
Satisfied, Utani got up to get some snacks, like he always did. He lived in a one-bedroom condo located 8 minutes from Shibuya Station. Cost 150,000 yen per month. It had been built after the earthquake, so the furnishings and layout were modern. A little more room would have been nice, but compared to the 40,000 yen per month place he'd lived in last year, it was heaven.
来年にはもうちょっと便利なところに引っ越すか。
At 21 years old, Utani felt satisfied for the first time in his life. In 4th grade, he'd gotten big into online gaming and stopped going to school. Eventually, he stopped leaving his room altogether. Man, started out young, 4th grade. Then he'd gotten addicted to drugs that made him sleepy, but did nothing else. MMOs, such gateway drugs. Once, seeing only darkness in his future, he'd planned to commit suicide. In the chaos after the earthquake 6 years ago, he'd finally managed to leave his room, but his family had already given up on him. After he failed his entrance exams, he went to live on his own in Shibuya, and he hadn't spoken to his parents since. As far as they knew, he'd failed the entrance exams 3 times in a row. In fact, he hadn't even gone to the tests after the first time. There wasn't anything he wanted to learn in college, or any companies he wanted to work for badly enough. He had no goal in life at all. But things were different now.
アットちゃんにもたまには本当のことが書かれてるもんだ。チーズでいいか。
He took a block of cheap cheese he bought at the supermarket out of the fridge. Usually, he never ate anything this cheap. But on Nikonia live streaming, it wasn't just what you said. How you looked when you said it also mattered. Utani wasn't a good-looking man, let alone a cute girl. He was just a plain old guy, and so, to keep his program popular, he needed to make them think that he was poor, barely managing to scrape by, in fact. That's why he kept the area around his PC and the parts of his apartment that you could see with his webcam completely plain. Last month, he'd finally reached his goal of 4,000 viewers. For a man with nothing going for him like Utani, this was extremely unusual. 3 months ago, he'd guessed the winners of a popularity contest a certain idol group was holding, as well as their total number of votes. That must have really paid off. After that, his numbers had been going up steadily. Late last month, when his streams had appeared at the top of Nikonia's page, he'd seen a huge increase. Right now, he'd gotten above 4,500, and it was quite possible he'd break 5,000 by the end of the month. It was around late last year when he'd started to wonder about his power. It was a certain rumor on one of At-chan's occult boards that made him really start to realize what he had. The name he'd chosen for his stream subtly reflected this. Then I learned that I can see the future, and with that, he used it to become the world's greatest streamer. He took out a knife to cut the cheese. There was a strange sound. You know what that is? That's the sound of a murderer. You know who knocks like that? Murderers knock like that. He thought he'd just imagined it when... Knock, 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 knock. He heard it again. It was coming from the door. Someone was clearly knocking on his door. Jungle, maybe? Suspicious, he walked toward the door to answer, then checked the clock. It was 11:41 p.m. Not exactly normal delivery hours.
No,
you're not. You're cutting some cheese. You're not streaming. The knocking continued. It was the same rhythm at the same pace. As if the visitor's goal wasn't to come inside, but simply to make that sound. Utani felt a bit creeped out. He decided to go to the intercom camera and see who it was, but then realized that would be pointless. Only the auto-locking door on the first floor had a camera. The door to Utani's room on the 5th floor had an intercom, but no camera. Utani gave up.
っ払いか?
No, the knocks were too steady for that. And there was no voice yelling at him to open up. He'd seen this door a million times, but suddenly it looked somehow different. Someone he didn't know was on the other side of the wall, demanding entry in the middle of the night. Somehow this made the door seem intimidating. Utani thought he might look through the peephole to see who was outside. He was then disgusted to find himself too scared to even get close to the door. Wait, the intercom didn't have a camera, but it did have a microphone. He turned toward the living room so he could use the intercom and find out what they wanted. Utani, it's me. Sorry to come by so suddenly. He stopped when he heard that voice. It's me. I'm very sorry to bother you at this hour. Utani tried to remember who the speaker was, but found he couldn't. But from the tone of the voice and the words, they probably weren't a weirdo. When they said, I'm sorry, it sounded like they really meant it. Utani sighed softly with relief and then realized he was still carrying the knife he had been using to cut the cheese. It suddenly felt stupid to feel so nervous. He quickly laid the knife on top of the sink.
はいはい、今開けます。どちら様ですか?
It's me, don't you remember? The voice simply repeated itself. But who are you? Utani whispered to himself as he opened the door. Should have just asked that in the intercom. Now you're dead, man. Dead with a cheap block of cheese. Utani narrowed his eyebrows at the people standing there. He looked them up and down, then looked at their faces again. Their eyes met.
あんたら、どこのどなた?
Utani suddenly felt a piercing headache. Utani closed his eyes and put his right hand up to his temple. He could feel the blood pounding in his veins through his fingers. He staggered and quickly put his other hand up against the wall to keep from falling over. The pain was like the old days, when he'd overdosed on antidepressants, but much more intense. He grit his teeth again, the pain. He grit his teeth again, the pain, and dug his nails into the wall that was holding him up. As he waited for the pain in his fingers to help dull the pain in his mind. Mr. Utani, are you okay? He heard a voice he'd heard many times before, and felt a concerned hand on his shoulder. He somehow managed to ignore the pain and open his eyes. A worried face was peering down at him.
大丈夫。最近たまにあるんだ。
Overwork, perhaps. You've been so busy lately. Oh no, Tank! What are you doing? Sorry about that. I temporarily had to pry open the top of my computer case, so my cat jumped on and stopped the fan, and because he stopped the fan, the computer started beeping because it's like, uh-oh, we're overheating. Okay. You've been so busy lately. You shouldn't push yourself too hard.
相変わらず心配性だな、お前は。大丈夫だよ。さあ、入ってくれ。
He opened his mouth as wide as he could and moaned, trying to ease the pain as he let his important guests inside. As he turned his back on his guests, he told himself that it had been a long time since he'd seen them. Or maybe not. It couldn't have been more than 2 months since they'd last met. It only felt long because he'd wanted to see them so badly.
そうだ。せっかく来てもらったのにすまん。生放送中なんだよ。
While he was out here, he decided he would cut some cheese for himself and his guests. Oh, don't worry about us.
いや、お前ら相手にそういうわけにもいかないだろう。ん?
What's wrong?
いや、なんでもない。
The blade wasn't cutting into the cheese. That's strange, he told himself, as he pushed down with more force. Oh no. Is this kind of game? I was really hoping it would be some kind of, like, Not this. Not cutting into himself like a crazy thing. Okay. He cut into its surface, and it made an unpleasant sound he'd never heard before, but no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't go further. Confused, he yanked the knife back and forth like a saw, but it only cut in slightly deeper. It was as if there was something hard inside the cheese, like a bone. And even though he'd only just taken it out of the fridge, it was slightly warm. Irritated, he slammed the handle of the knife against the cheese. But all it did was bash it in a little. He couldn't cut through it. I'll help you. His guests must have heard the sound because they rushed over. They had another knife. When did they get that out? There's a trick to cutting this thing. They put the knife up against the cheese and began to move it with a practical hand. It sounds like your work's going well. They smiled at Utani, their voices slightly low. Utani realized that they were trying to keep their voices from being picked up by the streaming microphone, and lowered his voice as well. He grinned and nodded. His guest had introduced him to a firm that handled advertising space for popular websites, which had been giving him regular work. His reputation had quietly spread throughout the small web advertising industry, and soon he was getting more and more offers.
流行を予想することが肝なこの仕事は転職だよ。出来レースみたいなもんだ。
Then why do these streams?
一言では言いづらいな。強いて言えば、自分がどこまでいけるか試したいみたいな感じなんだけど。
That's right. His power wasn't meant to be wasted on jobs that anyone could do.
誰も経験したことないから、誰かに聞くってわけにいかないだろ。だから自分でやれるだけやってみたいっつうかってかっこよすぎかこれは。
No, it's wonderful, I think. And done. After he'd smacked it a few times, the cheese was a little funny looking, but the even slices were lined up neatly on the plate.
悪いな、働かせて。
It's nothing, go on. I'll wait until your stream's finished.
ああ、冷蔵庫の中適当に見繕ってくれていいから。ああ、静かにな。
Utani took his cheese back to his seat and saw a flood of comments reading, "He's late," and "Did he log off?" What should have only been 3 minutes had turned into more than 15. Utani put a bite of the cheese in his mouth and began to chew loudly.
申し訳ない。この安売りセールしていたチーズがありえないくらい硬くて。
He apologized to the camera, remembering to keep up the act of being poor and starving. And as he hoped, the comments started to come in. Utani's face took on a confused expression. The comments were strange. He thought there might be something on the camera, but he turned around and saw only his fake poor room.
どうしました?
He spoke into the camera, but the comments still didn't make any sense, and they were coming in faster. Maybe there was a problem with the camera. He reached his right hand out toward it. In an instant, his headache was back. It was the same pain as before. No, worse. He closed his eyes and jerked forward, banging his head against the desk. But the pain in his head was so bad that he didn't even feel it. He tried to hold his head in his hands, but for some reason his right hand wouldn't move. So instead, he pushed his other hand up against his temple. It felt squishy. The vein was incredibly swollen, and it felt like rubber. And each time he felt his blood pulse through it, there was an unpleasant sensation in his fingers. He stamped his feet against the floor, hoping to find some small escape from the pain. But it didn't even get slightly better. It was then that he realized he was crying. He could feel the tears coming from his eyes. The pain was moving there now too. Unable to bear it, he opened his eyes. He gasped. Wait, I'm trying to read some of these. Okay. The whole scene appeared in front of him like some kind of awful magic trick. He suddenly heard the sound of something wet dripping onto the floor. His eyes reflexively turned towards it. His right arm was gone at the elbow, and the stump was gushing blood. There was a pool of it on the floor, and the sound he heard was the new blood splattering into it. Huh? Utani didn't understand what had happened to him. What was going on? He'd just gone to check on the knock at the door. The pain screamed within him. Any sense of pain in what remained of his right arm was overcome by the pain in his head. He felt nothing from his arm at all, though he saw the blood dripping to the floor. What the hell was going on? He blinked and forced his aching eyes to function as he looked around the room. On top of his desk, he found the rest of his arm. It was sitting on a plate. At first, it looked like it was still in one piece, but it wasn't. Don't show it! Please don't show it! It was neatly sliced into uniform pieces. Each piece was about 1 centimeter wide, and the slices moved neatly toward his finger. They sat upon the plate in, roughly, his arm's original shape. Miraculously, he saw there was no blood on the tip of his index finger. He still didn't understand that it was really his own arm. But sheer disgust at what he saw caused him to leap out of his chair. What was this? What kind of prank was this? The contents of his stomach flooded into his mouth. He vomited. The pink fluid splashed against the desk. He saw something solid in the middle of it. It was a thumb. It was covered in bite marks, saliva, and stomach acid, but horribly he remembered it. When had he put that into his mouth? In his pain-filled mind, he suddenly heard a sound he'd never heard before. Each time he heard the sound, the pain in his head got worse. He turned towards the camera, hoping for an answer to what was happening. But of course, there was none to be found. The screen was still filling with comments, but his eyes were too filled with tears for him to read them. As the whole world turned red, Utani didn't even realize that his lips were turning purple. Hold on, what are some of these reading? His lips had turned purple from lack of oxygen, but were stained red with blood from his severed thumb, which he had chewed himself. As he tried to fight the pain, he began to fall unconscious, and tears fell from his eyes. The tears seemed pink to him. Utani was weeping blood. He died, still facing the camera. His guests watched the chain of events unfold, then silently headed for the door. Just before they left the room. "Goodbye," they said, as if nothing at all was wrong, and shut the door. I love how that comment is extra saucy. Little too much sauce for me. Was really hoping for something a little more lighthearted than this. Whew. Momone Takayanagi had finished her concert, like always. She stayed behind to help, to put away the instruments. She even helped clean up the audience seats, even though that was the concert hall's job. Oh my god, is this another victim? Only after all of that was done could she take a break. There wasn't much time left before her solo street concert, but she still had to help anyway. She'd always been like that. Even if it wasn't her responsibility, she couldn't help but get involved. It was like in middle school when one of her friends who wasn't as good at studying asked her for test notes. Or in high school when a girl she knew asked her how to make Valentine's chocolate for a boy she really liked. She stayed up so many nights her own test grades were worse than her friends, and she didn't have even anyone to give chocolate to on Valentine's Day. In the end, it was the other person's responsibility, not hers, but...
要はヘタレなんだろうな。
Momone Takayanagi was, at heart, scared of not doing everything she could, even if everything wasn't her responsibility. The concert today was another big success. Sure, it was in a tiny room that could only fit in 150 people or so, standing room only, but tickets were 3,000 yen high for a band with an amateur vocalist like her, and they still sold out instantly. It was bizarre how excited the crowd was. She'd heard sobs during the ballad, and during one of the high-tempo songs, the audience had stood up all the way to the back row.
ありえない。
This is impossible. She felt a chill and hugged herself tightly. It's not that her band wasn't popular. They'd started out in the Nikonia Sang It category, and had kept by doing covers of popular anime songs. It helped that her face, which had earned her the nickname Scarecrow in school, could look really good when she wore makeup. Blech. And if all of them put on ridiculous costumes and acted like idiots, some people would enjoy it. Videos of their concerts and performances pulled a decent number of views online. But Takayanagi noticed. The vast majority of the people looking at the videos were people who'd come to her concerts. People who'd experienced that insane intensity were going back to the videos to try and feel it again. And Takayanagi knew that they probably wouldn't even feel even 1% of it.
ありえないよ。
It's just impossible. The ticket prices and audience sizes were one thing, but the strangest thing to her was their eyes. Their eyes pierced right through her, unblinking. They were like pets, totally dependent on their master. The meaning of the lyrics began to take over their lives, and they never even questioned it.
やっぱり私の声はおかしいんだ。
When she first realized that this was happening, she tried to quit the band. Even if she couldn't, she at least wanted to stop doing the live shows, where people heard her directly. But the others around her wouldn't let that happen. Your voice is amazing, they would tell her. They forced her to keep singing, even as the concerts began to terrify her. Takayanagi tried to get out of it, but in the end, she kept giving in. She owed her fellow band members for getting a plain, dull girl like her into music. And for a little while, part of her managed to have fun. But in the end, Takayanagi lacked the tiny bit of courage needed to break out of the cycle. She forced herself to get up and head towards the street concert, which she didn't really want to do. She'd received an email. She read it slowly.
嘘。
She almost dropped her smartphone. She read it again and again, trying to control her shaking hands. It was nothing special, just a simple message about one of the songs she'd made. Good song. Keep it up. That's very vague. Takayanagi tried to stop the tears but couldn't. The band would get too many messages like this to count, especially after concerts. She knew it was rude, but to be honest, she was sick of them. But this email address wasn't for her band. It was one for a site where she had anonymously uploaded original songs. In other words, whoever sent this message hadn't come to her concerts. They'd never heard her voice live or felt its strange power, but they had still said they liked her song.
マジですか?
Wiping away tears that wouldn't stop, she quickly wrote a response. That makes me feel really happy, thank you. Even after she sent it, she kept crying for a while. She hadn't cried this much since the earthquake. And then she stood up.
こんなもん!
She took her costumes for the day's concert out of her bag, balled them up and threw them in the trash. It was a white caped outfit worn by some angel character in some anime. Certain fans really loved it, but she didn't care about it at all. She took a wet towel off a nearby table and violently wiped away her makeup.
こけしで上等立ってんの。
She was never wearing another cape or putting on makeup to look like an anime character again. Never, she said aloud. She realized she was more excited than she'd ever been before. And then she started to realize what she wanted to do.
いっそのこと渋谷を離れるってのもありか。どうせいろいろゴタゴタしちゃうんだろうし。
What would happen if she said she was going to quit the band? It caused trouble for a lot of people, definitely. Her band was scheduled to play in the Restoration Festival. But even so, she never wanted to sing at another concert.
いつもストリートライブをやってる道は常連さんと勝ち合っちゃまずいから避けて。大丈夫か、この顔だし。
She laughed and kissed her smartphone.
やばい、楽しい。
She couldn't wait to get home and start fiddling with her music. Over the web, she could really share her music with others. As long as they weren't hearing her voice live, it would be fine. If she just played a recording from a speaker, for example.
小型のスピーカーなら家にもあったな。
That's right. She'd leave Shibuya, and when she had a few more songs, she could record them and play them at a street concert. That speaker was small enough that she could fit it under her clothes to fool people. It'd be rude to do the same song every time, so each time she'd re-record it at home. There was a knock at the door. One of the staffers, maybe.
あ、もう出ますから。
She smiled and answered them. Now that she'd thrown away her clothes, her bag was lighter than she'd ever imagined it could be. That lightness made her think about the future. She was happy.
Hi.
Takayanagi happily danced toward the door, completely ignorant of what was on the other side. September 19th, 2015, Friday night. Shortly after she finished, she was walking through Shibuya. She had a limp and dragged one leg behind her as if it was injured. Her bangs were unnaturally long, most of her face was covered by them. She wore a dark-colored dress that seemed to meet into the night, and above it, a bright red cardigan. Her chest, arms, and legs were almost completely covered. Despite the fact that the night was still warm, she wore gloves, as if it were a sin to show any skin at all.
あ、ごめんなさい。
She ran into a couple coming out of a hotel and staggered slightly. But she didn't even look at the people she ran into. She looked down and disappeared into the streets of Shibuya.
誰？決めな。
ねえ、今の人の顔見た？
んだよ。
気持ち悪い。何あれ？何？あの目。
I think for now, I mean, the music sounds, I don't know if it's optimistic's the word. Okay. I think this is the main character. I could be wrong, but for now, the game has quick saved, which is nice, and I'm hoping the killing is done for now. I don't want to see more. Honestly, I'm so glad that there wasn't another graphic thing. Because I gotta be prepared for this stuff mentally, you know. I don't go into this going, oh, look at goody, a man is mutilating himself. Num num. I bet he loves the taste of himself. No, I didn't know this is what it was gonna be. I'm gonna have to put some kind of warning or something. So yeah, all right. Well, I certainly am curious what happens. So Stay tuned for the next episode, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye!